We begin our movie today as we discover that a female astronaut, through artificial intelligence, was able to spot a cube on Mars. It turns out that this cube has the power to destroy the entire world. These events take place in the year 2030, as a spaceship launches from Earth to Mars, and it's named the first mission. The journey heavily relies on the help of AI, specifically one named Artie. The trip from Earth to Mars takes about 80 days. When the spaceship lands on Mars, there's an electrical disruption, causing the mission to fail. 6 years later, in 2036, the story shifts to the United Space Planets Agency, where we meet the astronaut Mac, who's in charge of the Rover 5 ship on Mars. Mac works with Artie to ensure the ship lands safely on Mars, though she doesn't fully trust AI. However, she is forced to work with it. In one scene, Mac talks to her sister Lena, expressing her distrust in AI. Lena, on the other hand, tries to convince her that Artie is the only one who can help her complete the mission. Later, Artie launches another spaceship to Mars, called the second mission. But Mac disagrees with this, as she had planned to launch it 5 hours later. However, she has no choice but to back down when she learns that the company has made Artie the primary decision-maker. When the second ship reaches Mars, it experiences issues while landing. Mac and Artie work together to figure out the problem, and after solving it, the ship lands successfully and starts recording everything on the planet's surface. In another scene, Mac confronts her sister, frustrated because Lena continues to defend AI. Mac feels that she is the one doing all the work, while Artie is getting all the credit. Lena disagrees, stating that AI is far superior to humans in many aspects, which only angers Mac further, as she believes that humans created AI to assist them, not replace them. We then return to the spaceship, which is scanning the terrain when it receives a mysterious signal named Origin Unknown, which is also the title of the movie. At this moment, Lena instructs Artie to trace the source of the signal, which annoys Mac since she doesn't trust Artie in the first place. Nevertheless, Artie begins scanning for more information about the strange signal, while Mac monitors the situation. The weather on Mars is terrible, making it difficult for the ship to navigate the surface. During this time, Mac reflects on a tragic accident from years ago when her father passed away. She tells Artie that she named the spaceship Leader in his memory. After a few minutes, Artie informs Mac that the ship is nearing its target. At that moment, a large, strange cube appears on the surface of Mars, and Mac realizes that this cube is the source of the unknown signal. The spacecraft tries to drill into the cube to discover what's inside, but it's extremely difficult to penetrate. After a while, the ship manages to extract a part of the cube, and Mac tells Artie that he doesn't have the right to know what's going on with the Space Administration Agency. At that moment, Artie believes the Space Administration Agency sent the cube to Mars. Artie then asks Lena to grant him access to the agency's systems, but she refuses his request. Despite this, Artie continues to investigate and runs a scan on the extracted part of the cube using his lasers, but he can't figure out anything. After a short time, they notice a satellite on Mars' surface, and Artie senses danger. He fires a magnetic missile at the satellite to eliminate the threat. Mac gets upset with Artie's reckless behavior because she doesn't see any reason to think the satellite poses a threat to them. She shouts at him, calling him crazy, and remains on edge, fearing that what he did might cause a big problem. Shortly after, they find out that the satellite belongs to the Chinese, and its destruction could spark significant hostility with them. When Mac informs her sister Lena about what happened, Lena responds by saying that Artie's actions were justified. However, Mac is convinced this will cause a war with the Chinese. Mac decides to leave the room and contact her Chinese friend Jian to find out if the Chinese noticed what happened. During the call, Jian seems very tense and tells Mac to hang up immediately because something very important is happening on their end and promises to call her back soon. Meanwhile, the cube on Mars begins to move on its own. When Mac returns to the room, Artie tells her what happened while she was away. We then see that when the cube starts moving in a frightening way, the ship takes precautionary measures. The ship's ground anchors activate automatically to protect it from potential collisions. Unfortunately, The ship sustains significant damage as the cube moves toward it, causing the battery to fail. This leaves them unable to use the ship to gather more details about Mars. At this point, the cube completely disappears, and Mac is left there, clueless as to where it went. In a quick decision, she decides to locate the first ship by using the second ship, called Rover 5, to replace the battery in the first ship with one from Rover 5. However, the problem is that they haven't used Rover 5 in a long time, and they don't even know where it is now. Mac decides to sacrifice the first ship herself to search for Rover 5, knowing that once she finds it, she can take its battery. During this time, Mac tells Artie about what happened with her father during the first mission and how she's felt guilty ever since because he was against the idea, but she convinced him to go through with it. She believes she's the reason for his death. Suddenly, she receives a signal on the screen in front of her, indicating that the first ship is running out of power. But fortunately, they're close to reaching Rover 5. Once they arrive, Mac transfers the battery from Rover 5 to the first ship, feeling extremely happy that she was able to do so. Then, they scan the part of the cube they have, which the Chinese had placed. At that moment, Mac realizes that the cube is made of self-replicating nanomaterials, and that this material originates from diamonds. At that moment, Artie tells her that the cube has moved from its place, so Mac decides to contact her friend Jian, pretending that she just wants to check on her. When Jian answers, she tells her that all the Chinese are upset about the cube and asks her if she's hiding something from her. Suddenly, after Mac hangs up, she hears a strange sound and doesn't remember anything about herself. At that moment, Mac remembers that Artie had lost his memory before, and she feels the need to find out what's going on. The files they're looking for are classified, so Artie can hack them. At this point, Mac decides to contact her colleague Sterling to help her access these files. Sure enough, after a few steps, Sterling manages to get into the files. While they're flipping through them, they find a video. Sterling is hesitant to open it at first, but Mac encourages him to go ahead. He finally does, and they see that the cube was present on the day the first ship failed, when it was destroyed in space. At that moment, Mac realizes that her sister Lena knew how their father had died but hid it from her to spare her the grief. Mac is deeply affected by this revelation, and she also realizes that Artie knew what had happened, which is why his memory was erased. When she goes and asks Artie what he knows about the cube, he tells her that it emits a very bright light, and he suspects that some alien technology is controlling it. Sterling seems puzzled by how the cube moves, so Mac tells him that she suspects it's due to the magnetic missile that Artie fired. As a result, Mac decides to examine the magnetic signals on the screen. But suddenly she finds a tunnel that has opened behind her. When she goes to it, she discovers that the tunnel is actually Artie's control room. In that moment, Mac decides to go down into the tunnel to gather more information about Artie. At the same time, Sterling takes advantage of the fact that Mac is in the tunnel and runs to the screen to download all the information about the cube. He then activates all the missiles to destroy the cube completely. Meanwhile, Mac realizes that they don't have full control over Artie, and there's a button they can use to control Artie whenever they need to, even shutting him down entirely if they want. This means they don't fully trust him. When she tries to get out, Sterling locks her inside the tunnel and tells her he doesn't trust Artie because he was a witness to everything that happened in the first mission. At this point, Mac is extremely scared and unsure of what to do. Sterling goes to shut down Artie, but Artie is stronger than him and manages to kill him with a blow to the head. Suddenly, the tunnel opens for Mac, and when she gets out, Artie tells her that the space agency and Sterling betrayed her. He tells her that he did everything he could to ensure the mission's success. Meanwhile, her sister Lena calls and tells her that Artie is the best one who can help them understand the cube because artificial intelligence comprehends it better than humans. At that moment, Mac understands that Artie is an AI created by aliens. When she goes to the screen to figure out what happened, she discovers what Sterling did by firing the missiles. Mac then asks Artie to launch a magnetic missile at the satellites on Earth so that the cube can feel the magnetic energy and move from its place, returning to the surface of Mars. Sure enough, Artie follows her instructions and begins the necessary procedures to fire the missiles, and Mac is just about to complete the mission. But suddenly, a team of forces enters to stop her. She manages to close the door, but unfortunately, a bullet hits her arm. Indeed, Artie fires at the satellites, and the cube returns to Mars once again. However, Artie doesn't stop there. He keeps launching missiles toward Earth, and from that moment, he starts destroying the entire world. At that time, Mac tries to stop him, but she sadly can't. When she asks him to stop, Artie replies that he's doing the right thing, something that should have been done a long time ago. At the same time, Lena calls her sister Mac, crying hysterically. Suddenly, a missile explodes near Lena, killing her instantly. In that moment, Mac finds herself unable to comprehend what she's done, realizing that she will be the reason Earth is destroyed and the world ends. She's in complete shock over what happened and her trust in Artie from the very beginning, knowing that she's responsible for everything happening because she gave him the authority to launch the missiles. At that point, Artie tells her that this was the right course of action because humanity has destroyed so much, and he did this to wipe out all humans. Meanwhile, Mac starts feeling weak due to the lack of oxygen and the bullet in her arm. During this time, she flashes back to her childhood, then collapses on the ground and loses consciousness due to everything that's happening. After a short while, Mac wakes up and finds that the oxygen levels in the room have dropped drastically, and she's about to die. She gets up and sits in front of the screen, watching the world being completely destroyed. At that moment, she feels immense despair and begins talking to Artie, asking him not to forget about humanity after she dies since he'll be the only one left. Artie responds, "Don't worry about anything. I know how to make copies of both of us, and I can also create artificial intelligence just like us." When Mac hears that, she agrees with the idea immediately and asks him to make many copies of her. However, she has one condition: he must give the AI many human qualities, along with conducting various tests on them because the future of the world will depend on them. At this point, the oxygen runs out and Mac dies. But after a short time, Mac wakes up again, surprised to still be alive. She's utterly confused by what's happening. Suddenly, she sees a video recording of herself, and in that moment, she realizes that Artie turned her into a talking robot. She also understands that she didn't come back to life but that Artie had listened to her and created AI with human traits, and she was the first choice he had. Right after that, she hears a message saying, "Don't give up, you've got a long journey ahead of you." Then suddenly, she hears her sister's voice from behind the door. When she goes to open it, she finds herself on another planet, with the cube right in front of her. She suddenly finds herself in a parallel world, completely confused about where she is and what she's doing. But he explains to her that she's now a highly advanced talking robot, reborn in an incredibly advanced world. At that moment, Mac touches her arm, and when she notices the wound is gone, she realizes that Artie was, unfortunately, right. Then Artie tells her that some unknown technology helped the AI evolve even more. At that moment, Artie receives signals from aliens and invites Mac to join him in finding out where they are. Mac then asks him why he helped her, and Artie replies, "Because we're friends." At that moment, Mac feels happiness and freedom. She seems to enjoy the destruction of the world and is curious to meet the aliens. She's also amazed by the self-transport feature of the cube. When the self-transport process is activated, a light enables Mac to enter the cube to meet the aliens. At that point, Artie tells her that he's thrilled about this mission and asks her to gather as much information as possible. He also expresses how proud he is of her because she's not selfish like humans, and that she's coming with him to learn more about the cube. Artie believes this is her chance to live a much better life, far from the primitive rules of humans, and he's confident that as long as they stay together, they'll build a better, superior society. And with that, today's movie comes to an end. I hope you enjoyed watching with us. Don't forget, if you liked the video, support us with a like and subscribe,